Matt Weston left Charlotte at 6:47 in the morning. No driver, no assistant sitting in the passenger seat with a schedule and a thermos of somebody else's coffee. No calls patched through the car speakers about quarterly projections or pending acquisitions. Just him, the I-85 North ramp at the edge of the city, and 90 miles of highway unrolling in the grey November light. He had not slept. Hi, my beautiful and loyal family. Welcome back to your own family channel, Mr. Peter Stories. Before we begin, one small request. If you ever see my stories on another channel, please report them and let me know. Your support means everything to me. Watch this story until the very end. And don't forget to tell me in the comments what lesson you learned. I'll be very, very upset with you if you don't tell me what you learned from today's story. Now, let's continue. He had not slept properly in longer than he wanted to calculate, but last night had been different. Last night he had sat at the window of his penthouse on South Tryon Street and watched Charlotte glitter below him the way it always did. Indifferent, magnificent, completely unbothered by the fact that the man looking down at it had everything and felt none of it. And somewhere around 3 in the morning he had stopped pretending. He knew what he needed to do. He had known for 6 years. The drive took an hour and 34 minutes. He did not play music. He did not listen to the financial podcast his assistant had loaded onto his phone the week before. He drove the way a man drives when his mind is already somewhere else entirely. Steady hands, steady speed, the flat winter landscape of Piedmont, North Carolina, sliding past the windows like a scene from someone else's life. On the passenger seat, face down, was his phone. One photo lived on that phone that he had never deleted, never moved to a folder, never buried under other images the way a sensible man would have. It sat in his camera roll like a fact he could not argue with. Time-stamped 6 years and 4 months ago, taken on a slow Tuesday afternoon on Battleground Avenue in Greensboro, North Carolina. Chiaka Dunn. She was not looking at the camera. She never knew he took it. She was standing just outside the diner where she worked, still in her uniform, laughing at something one of the other waitresses had said. Her head was tilted back slightly. Her eyes were almost closed. The late afternoon sun was coming at her from the left, and it caught the side of her face in a way that made the photograph look like something a person would frame and put on a wall. He had taken it because he was already in love with her, and he did not yet have the words for it. He had kept it because 6 years later, he still did not have the words for what losing her had cost him. Lena's Corner Diner sat on Battleground Avenue between a tire shop and a nail supply store, the kind of place that had been in the same spot so long it had become invisible to people who drove past it every day. The sign above the door was the original one, white letters on a dark green background, slightly faded at the edges. The parking lot held 8 cars comfortably, and 12 if nobody cared about the lines. Matt pulled in at 8:23 in the morning. He sat in the car for a moment. Through the plate glass window, he could see the interior, the long counter with its fixed stools, the row of booths along the wall, the coffee station behind the counter that had been in the same position since the place opened. A waitress in a dark apron was moving between tables with a coffee pot. An older man sat at the counter with a newspaper folded to the crossword. It looked exactly the same. That was the thing about places like this. They did not renovate. They did not rebrand. They just kept being themselves, year after year, while everything around them changed and everyone who had ever mattered to you moved on. He got out of the car. The bell above the door announced him to nobody in particular. The warmth of the place reached him immediately. That particular diner warmth that is 1 part heating system and 3 parts decades of breakfast being cooked on the same flat-top griddle. The smell of butter and black coffee and something sweet that might have been pecan waffles hit him before he had taken 3 steps inside. A young woman behind the counter looked up. "Sit anywhere," she said. He did not sit anywhere. He walked to the counter and he took his phone from his coat pocket and he opened the camera roll and he turned the screen toward her. "I'm looking for someone," he said. "Her name is Chiaka Dunn. She used to work here." The young woman looked at the photo. Her expression shifted immediately. Not suspicion, not wariness, but the particular softness that comes across a person's face when they recognize someone they genuinely like. "Chiaka," she said, "she hasn't worked here in about 2 years. Do you know where she is?" "I know she has her own catering business now. Dunn and Dunny, I think it's called." She paused. "I don't have an address or anything." "That's all right," Matt said. "Thank you." He turned toward the booths. He found it without thinking. Second from the back, left side, the one with the slightly uneven table that rocked if you put your elbow on it wrong. He had put his elbow on it wrong approximately 40 times over the course of 2 years, and Chiaka had laughed at him every single time. He sat down. The young waitress came over with a coffee pot and poured without asking. He wrapped both hands around the mug and looked at the table and did not drink. He showed the photo to the cook when he came out to restock the counter. The cook, a large, unhurried man in his 50s with a graying beard, studied the image for a moment and said, "Sure, I remember Chiaka. Hard worker, good people." He did not have a number or an address either. The older man at the counter with the crossword looked up when Matt approached. He studied the photo through thick-lensed glasses and nodded slowly. "Chiaka Dunn," the man said, as though the name itself carried pleasant associations. "She used to bring me decaf even when I ordered regular because she said I was wound up tight enough already." He smiled at whatever memory that was. "I don't know where she's working these days, but she was always at that farmer's market on Yanceyville on Saturday mornings. Used to sell those little spiced nut packets." He tapped the side of his head. "Good memory for faces, even better for people worth remembering." Matt thanked him and went back to the booth. He stayed for 40 minutes. He drank the coffee without tasting it. He looked at the booth across from him where she used to sit, always with her back to the room because she spent her shifts facing the room, and when she was off, she wanted to face something that wasn't other people's needs. He had found that out on their 3rd time sitting here together, and he had thought at the time that it was the most quietly sensible thing he had ever heard another person say about themselves. She had known herself completely even then. He had been 28 years old, supervising the night shift at a logistics warehouse on the south side of Charlotte, driving a car with 200,000 miles on it, eating whatever was cheapest and fastest, because he was working 80 hours a week trying to pull something out of nothing. He had stopped at this diner on his way back from a delivery run because it was the first place he had seen with lights still on, and he had not eaten since noon. Chiaka Dunn had taken his order. She was 28 herself. She moved with the efficiency of someone who had been on their feet for 7 hours and intended to get through 3 more without complaint. She had not flirted with him. She had not performed anything. She had just taken his order and brought his food. And when he made a comment about the waffles that was genuinely stupid, she had looked at him with an expression of such level-headed amusement that he had laughed before she did. He came back the next day, and the day after that. On the 14th consecutive visit, she had sat across from him in this booth on her break and said, "You are either the most persistent man I have ever met, or you genuinely cannot find anywhere else to eat in this city. And since you told me last week you live in Charlotte, I don't believe it's the second one." He had told her the truth. He was coming back because of her. She had looked at him for a long moment with those steady, unhurried eyes, and then she had said, "I'll have coffee with you, one time. Don't make it strange." He had not made it strange. He had fallen in love with her instead, slowly and then entirely, the way a man falls in love when he is not expecting it and has no defenses prepared. And then the money came, and the contracts came, and the new world came with its new people and its new expectations and its unspoken insistence that a man ascending could not afford to carry things from the life he was ascending from. He had made the worst decision of his life. He had let her go, not honestly, not with a real conversation or a genuine accounting of what he was choosing. He had let the distance grow until it became the answer, and he had told himself she would be fine, that she was strong enough, that the life he was building had no room for what they had been. He sat in the booth now at 38 years old, with his name on 3 buildings in Charlotte and a net worth that would have been incomprehensible to the man who used to drive 90 miles for a cup of coffee and a conversation, and he understood with complete clarity that none of it meant a single thing. He picked up his phone. He looked at her photo. She was still laughing at something he couldn't see, tilted toward the afternoon sun, completely unaware that the man who would one day sit in her old diner, missing her terribly, had been standing 5 feet away with his phone in his hand, already certain she was the best thing that had ever happened to him. He called Curtis. "Find her," he said when Curtis picked up. "Dunn and Dunn Catering, Greensboro. I need to know where she's going to be." He set the phone down on the table. Outside on Battleground Avenue, the morning traffic moved in its ordinary way, trucks and commuters and people with somewhere to be. Inside the diner it was warm and quiet and smelled like butter and coffee and 20 years of the same good food. Matt Weston sat in the booth where it had all begun and waited for someone to tell him where to find the woman he should never have left. Chapter 2. Door to door. Curtis called back at 11:47 that same morning. He had found a tagged post on the Dunn and Dunn Catering social media page, a photograph reposted by Florida Street Baptist Church at 1403 West Florida Street, announcing a community fundraiser that Saturday. The caption read, "Catering provided by the wonderful Chiaka Dunn of Dunn and Dunn, come hungry." There was a photo of a spread that stopped Matt mid-breath. Jerk chicken arranged on a long wooden board, rice and peas in a wide ceramic dish, fried plantains in a wicker basket lined with brown paper. Everything looked like it had been made with genuine care rather than commercial efficiency. "That's this Saturday," Curtis said. 3 days. "I'm not waiting 3 days," Matt said. There was a pause on the line. Curtis had known Matt since the warehouse days. He understood when to push back and when to simply say, "All right, what do you need?" "I need to find her before Saturday." He spent the rest of Tuesday and all of Wednesday on foot in Greensboro. He was not impulsive by nature. The man who had built a logistics empire from a single trucking contract understood patience and process better than almost anyone. But this was not business. This was the one area of his life where patience had already cost him everything, and he was not interested in being strategic about it any longer. He went back to Battleground Avenue first. He walked into the tire shop next to the diner and showed Chiaka's photo to the woman behind the front desk. The woman recognized her immediately, said she used to wave at her through the window every morning, that she always parked in the same spot, that she had not seen her in a couple of years but remembered her fondly. No address, no number. He tried the nail supply store on the other side of the diner. The owner, a small, quiet man stacking inventory near the back, looked at the photo and said he remembered the face but could not place the name. He suggested Matt try the community board at the Greensboro Farmers Curb Market on Yanceyville Street. Matt drove to 501 Yanceyville Street. The market was not open on a Wednesday morning in November for its full session, but several vendors were present for a midweek market that ran in the afternoons. Matt walked the stalls with his phone in his hand, showing the photo. A woman selling sweet potato pies looked at the image and smiled with the warmth of genuine recognition. "Chiaka Dunn," the woman said. "Lord, yes. She used to have a little table right over there, end of the row. Sold the most beautiful spiced pecans you ever tasted." She shook her head with a fondness that was entirely unperformed. "She doesn't come here anymore. Got her own proper business now. I see her posts online sometimes. That girl can cook." "Do you know where she lives?" Matt asked. The woman looked at him carefully. not unkindly. The way an older woman looks at a man when she is deciding whether his intentions deserve her assistance. "Why are you looking for her?" she asked. Matt did not hesitate. "Because I should never have stopped." The woman studied him for another moment. Then she said, "I don't have her address, but she catered a dinner at the church hall on Florida Street last month. You might try there." He drove to Florida Street Baptist Church. The church secretary, a composed woman named Mrs. Aldridge, who appeared to be in her mid-60s and wore reading glasses on a beaded chain, listened to Matt's inquiry with the measured patience of someone who had heard many requests and had learned to assess them thoroughly before responding. She looked at the photo. "I know Chiaka well," she said. "She's catered for us twice now. Excellent work both times. The congregation adores her." "I'm an old friend," Matt said. "I've been trying to reach her." Mrs. Aldridge looked at him over the top of her glasses with the particular expression of a woman who has been a church secretary long enough to distinguish between an old friend and an old problem. "I can't give out personal information," she said, "but I can tell you that she's catering our fundraiser this Saturday. If you come in good faith, you'll see her then." He thanked her and walked back to his car. He sat behind the wheel on West Florida Street and looked out through the windshield at the neighborhood around him. Modest homes, mature trees losing their last leaves, a woman walking a dog along the opposite pavement, the kind of ordinary Thursday morning street that existed all over America and asked nothing dramatic of anyone who lived on it. He thought about waiting until Saturday. He thought about it for approximately 90 seconds. Then he drove to the apartment building on Westover Terrace that Curtis had found through the business registration records for Dunn and Dunn Catering. A 3-story brick building with a tidy car park and a row of potted plants along the entrance that someone clearly maintained with care. He did not go to her door. He was not that man. He understood the difference between persistence and intrusion, and he had no intention of frightening her or cornering her in her own home. He sat in the car park for a few minutes and looked at the building and thought about the fact that she had built an entire life in this city, a business, a community, a reputation that made strangers at market stalls smile when they heard her name, while he had been across the state accumulating things that meant less than he had told himself they did. He was about to start the engine when the woman in the apartment above the entrance opened her window and looked down at him with the directness of someone who had noticed a strange car parked in her lot and intended to say so. Matt lowered his window. "I'm looking for Chiaka Dunn," he said. "She lives here, I believe. I'm not here to disturb her. I'm an old friend." The woman, gray-haired, sharp-eyed, wearing a housecoat and the expression of a person who had lived long enough to require a better answer than that, said, "What kind of old friend parks in the lot and doesn't knock?" "The kind who isn't sure he deserves to," Matt said. The woman was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "She isn't home, works long days." She paused. "I'm not giving you her number, but I'll tell her someone came by." "Tell her it was Matt," he said. "She'll know." He drove back to the O. Henry Hotel on Green Valley Road and ate dinner alone in the restaurant and did not taste a single thing on the plate. In Greensboro, in a salon chair on South Elm Street, Tawanda Bryson's phone rang at 7:43 that evening. It was the woman from the apartment building on Westover Terrace, who was also Tawanda's cousin's neighbor and had Tawanda's number for reasons that had nothing to do with any of this. She told Tawanda about the man in the car park. She described him, the coat, the car, the way he had looked at the building. She mentioned the name he had left. Tawanda sat very still in her salon chair for 3 full seconds. Then she said, "Thank you," and hung up and immediately dialed Chiaka. Chiaka was in her kitchen on Westover Terrace, still in her work clothes, sitting at the table with a cup of tea she had made 20 minutes ago and not yet touched. She had been on her feet since 5 in the morning, preparing a delivery order. 42 servings of braised short rib with roasted sweet potato and collard greens, all packaged and delivered by noon. After that, she had driven across town to meet a potential new client, stood in a church hall for 40 minutes discussing a December event, driven home, showered, and sat down at the table with the tea. She had been sitting there for 20 minutes because she was tired in a way she could not fully account for. It was not the work. She had done heavier work days than this and felt fine afterward. This was a different kind of tired, a weariness that started somewhere inside and worked outward, settling in her bones and her shoulders and behind her eyes. She had been feeling it for about 3 months, off and on. She had told herself it was the change of season, the longer hours, the stress of running a one-woman operation through the autumn calendar rush. She picked up when she saw Tawanda's name. "Tell me something good," she said. Tawanda did not tell her something good. She told her about the man who had spent 2 days walking around Greensboro, showing a photo to strangers. She told her about Battleground Avenue and the market on Yanceyville Street, and the woman on Westover Terrace who had looked down at a man in a car park asking for Chiaka Dunn with the expression of someone carrying more history than he knew what to do with. She told her the name he had left. The kitchen went completely silent. Chiaka set her tea down very carefully on the table. She looked at the wall across from her. The clock above the stove read 8:04. Outside the window, the November evening was dark and still and completely ordinary. "Chiaka," Tawanda said, "say something." Chiaka said nothing for a long moment. Then she said, "Lock your doors." "That's not what I'm joking," Chiaka said. But her voice was not entirely steady, and Tawanda heard it, and neither of them mentioned it. "I'm fine. He doesn't know where I live." "He was in your car park, baby." Another silence. "I'm fine," Chiaka said again. "I'll call you tomorrow." She hung up and sat alone in her kitchen with the cold tea and the ticking clock and the name sitting in the middle of the quiet like something she had not given permission to enter. Matt Weston. She had not said his name out loud in longer than she could honestly remember. She pressed her fingers against the side of her neck slowly, the way she had been doing lately when the fatigue came. A small private gesture she had not explained to anyone and did not intend to. She told herself it was a tension headache. She told herself it was the hour and the long day and the cold weather moving in. She told herself a great many things. She picked up the tea, found it too cold to drink, and went to bed with the specific discipline of a woman who had learned to manage her own interior weather without burdening anyone else with the forecast. Across the city, in a 4th-floor room at the O. Henry Hotel, Matt Weston sat on the edge of the bed with his phone in his hand and her photo on the screen. He was not giving up. He had given up once. He understood now, in a way that no amount of money or success or accumulated achievement had been able to teach him, that the single most expensive thing he had ever done in his life was let Chiaka Dunn go without a fight. He was not making that mistake again. Chapter 3. He finds her. Curtis sent the message at 9:14 on Saturday morning. It was a screenshot of the Florida Street Baptist Church fundraiser post, the same one he had found earlier in the week. Below it, Curtis had typed 4 words: "Today starts at noon." Matt was already dressed. He drove from the O. Henry Hotel on Green Valley Road through the Saturday morning streets of Greensboro, with the particular calm of a man who has made a decision he intends to see through regardless of how it lands. The city moved around him in its weekend rhythm, families walking to cars with children in tow, a man hosing down his front steps, a produce truck idling outside a corner store on the way down Summit Avenue. Greensboro on a Saturday morning was unhurried and unimpressed by urgency, and Matt drove through it at exactly the speed limit. He arrived at Florida Street Baptist Church at 11:41. The fundraiser was not yet open to the public. The car park held a handful of vehicles, volunteers probably, and whoever was setting up inside. Matt parked at the far end and sat for a moment. Through the side entrance of the church hall, he could see the double doors propped open and the faint movement of people carrying things. He could smell food from where he sat with the car window cracked. Something warm and deeply seasoned that reached him on the November air and made the back of his throat ache with a recognition he had not expected. He got out of the car. He did not go through the main entrance. He walked around the side of the building to where the double doors stood open, and he stopped in the doorway and looked in. The hall was long and simply furnished. Folding tables arranged in rows, chairs stacked along one wall waiting to be distributed. Paper tablecloths in the church's colors being smoothed flat by two teenage volunteers who were doing the job with the distracted efficiency of young people fulfilling an obligation. At the far end of the hall, near a serving counter that had been set with warming trays and stacked plates, a woman was directing the arrangement of the food with the focused authority of someone who had done this many times and knew exactly how she wanted it done. Chiaka Dunn. Matt stood in the doorway and did not move. She was wearing dark trousers and a white chef's jacket with her business name stitched on the breast pocket in small, neat letters. Her hair was pulled back. She was speaking to a young man beside her, her assistant clearly, gesturing at the position of the warming trays with the specific decisiveness of someone whose instructions did not require repetition. She adjusted the angle of a serving spoon. She lifted the lid on a tray, checked the temperature of something, replaced the lid with a small, satisfied nod. She moved with the same efficiency he remembered, the same complete self-possession, the same quality of being entirely present in whatever she was doing, as though the task in front of her deserved her full attention and she intended to give it. She was 34 years old, and she looked like someone who had built something real and knew it. He stood there for longer than he meant to. Then she turned to reach for a stack of serving tongs on the counter behind her, and she saw him. The hall was not silent. The teenagers were talking. The assistant was moving a tray. Someone was opening a door somewhere deeper in the building. But in the space between Chiaka's eyes, finding Matt's and the next moment arriving, everything in the room seemed to lose its sound. She did not drop what she was holding. She did not take a step backward. She looked at him with an expression that was absolutely still, not blank but contained, the way a person looks when they are processing something they have been privately preparing for and are still not ready for, now that it has arrived. She looked at him for 3 full seconds. Then she looked back at the serving tongs in her hand and placed them on the counter with deliberate care and said, without raising her voice, "I have 40 people to feed." "I know," Matt said. "Then you know this is not the time." "I'm not here to make a scene," he said. "I just needed to see you." She did not answer immediately. She picked up a ladle and checked the alignment of the warming tray nearest to her, with the focused attention of a woman who was using the task to anchor herself. "You've been showing my picture to people," she said. It was not a question. "Yes. Mrs. Aldridge at the church called me on Thursday. I figured she might. The woman on my street called to wonder. I figured that too." She finally looked at him again, direct, steady. The gaze of a woman who had learned over 34 years of absorbing difficult things to look at them without flinching. "What do you want, Matt?" He took his phone from his pocket. He opened the camera roll. He walked across the hall, slowly, no sudden movements, the way you move towards something you do not want to frighten. And he held the screen out toward her. She looked at the photo. She was quiet for a moment that stretched longer than either of them acknowledged. In the image, she was 28 years old, standing outside a diner on Battleground Avenue in the afternoon sun, laughing at something she could not now remember, completely unaware that the man beside her had already decided she was the most important person he had ever met. "You kept that," she said. "I never deleted it." She handed the phone back to him without touching his hand. A precise transaction. She was very careful about the distance. "I have a fundraiser to run," she said. I know. I'll go. Good. He did not move immediately. He stood there with the phone in his hand and looked at her the way a man looks at something he has been missing for so long that the reality of it standing in front of him has not yet finished arriving. You look well, he said. You look like yourself. Something moved briefly across her face, too quick to name, too genuine to be performed. It was gone before he could be certain he had seen it. Go, Matt, she said quietly. He went. He walked back through the double doors and out into the November air and around the side of the building to the car park. He got into the car and sat with his hands on the wheel. Inside the hall, Chiaka stood at the serving counter and did not move for a moment. Her assistant appeared beside her. You all right, Miss Dunn? Fine, she said. She picked up the ladle. Her hands were steady. She had always had steady hands. Bring the rice out from the back. We open in 15 minutes. The young man went to the back room. Chiaka stood alone at the counter and looked at the food arranged in front of her. The careful rows of dishes she had been preparing since 4:30 that morning. The work she had built from nothing through sheer force of discipline and refusal to stop. And she breathed slowly. Her right hand moved to the side of her neck for a moment. That gesture again, private and brief. She let her hand fall before her assistant returned. She was tired. She had been tired for months. She told herself it was the early start, the cold, the unexpected ambush of a face she had spent 6 years filing carefully into the past. She told herself all of it was fine. In the car park, Matt sat without starting the engine for a long time. He thought about the way she had looked at the photograph, the stillness that had come over her face, the precision with which she had handed his phone back without allowing her fingers to meet his. She was not indifferent. A genuinely indifferent person does not maintain that kind of careful distance. Distance like that requires effort. Distance like that means there is something being kept on the other side of it. He started the engine. He pulled out of the car park onto West Florida Street and pointed the car toward Green Valley Road. He was not leaving Greensboro. He had come here with one clear understanding of what he owed this situation, and 3 minutes in a church hall had not changed it. If anything, it had sharpened it. The way seeing a thing you have been trying to remember with perfect accuracy sharpens everything the moment the real version is standing in front of you. She was exactly who she had always been, and he had been a fool of the most thorough and irreversible kind. He picked up his phone at the next red light and called Curtis. I found her, he said. And, Curtis said. Matt was quiet for a moment. Outside the window, Greensboro moved past in its ordinary Saturday way, unhurried and unimpressed. She told me to go, he said. Did you? From the church, not from the city. Curtis made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite a sigh, but occupied the precise territory between them. What do you need? Nothing right now, Matt said. I just needed to hear a voice that wasn't surprised by any of this. I'm not surprised by any of this, Curtis said. I know, Matt said. That's why I called you. He drove back to the hotel in the thin November light, with Chiaka's face still occupying the part of his mind where his most important things lived, and he sat in the lobby of the O. Henry with a coffee he did not order for the purpose of drinking, and he made himself be still. He was good at building things. He was going to need to be better at this. Chapter 4. Rohan and Beverly. Rohan Dunn found out on Sunday morning. He did not find out from Chiaka. He found out from Tawanda, who had been holding the information for approximately 18 hours and had reached the outer limit of her capacity to sit on it. She called him at 8:45 while he was drinking coffee on the front steps of his workshop off Market Street, and she told him everything: the photo search, Battleground Avenue, the farmer's curb market on Yanceyville Street, the car park on Westover Terrace, The church hall on West Florida Street, where Matt Weston had walked through the double doors the previous morning and stood there looking at Chiaka like a man who had driven across the state and intended to keep driving until someone stopped him. Rohan listened to all of it without interrupting. When Tawanda finished, he said, "Where is he staying?" "Rohan, I'm not going to do anything stupid," he said. "I just need to know where he is." Tawanda told him about the O. Henry Hotel on Green Valley Road because she knew Rohan well enough to understand that withholding information from him only made him more determined. And a determined Rohan, moving without information, was considerably more dangerous than a determined Rohan who knew exactly where he was going. He drove to Green Valley Road. He parked in the hotel lot and walked through the lobby with the unhurried confidence of a man who belonged wherever he decided to be. At the front desk, he gave Matt Weston's name and said he was an old acquaintance. The desk clerk called the room. There was a pause. Then the clerk said Mr. Weston would be down in a few minutes and would he like to wait in the lobby. Rohan sat in one of the lobby chairs and waited. He was 36 years old. He had spent 4 years in the army and another 10 building custom cabinets in a workshop he owned outright on Market Street. He was not a large man in the way that announces itself immediately, but he occupied space with a solidity that people registered without quite knowing why. He had his mother's patience and his father's jaw, and a memory for relevant facts that had served him well in both the military and in business. The relevant fact he was sitting with now was this. He had been 24 years old when Matt Weston left his sister, and he had watched Chiaka eat 1 meal a day for 6 weeks, not because she was dieting, but because getting off the couch required more energy than she had. He had watched her go back to double shifts at the diner 2 months after the breakup with the specific determination of a person who has decided that work is the only thing that cannot disappoint you. He had watched her build Dunn from a folding table in her apartment kitchen with a discipline so fierce it sometimes looked from the outside like it was holding something back rather than pushing something forward. He had watched all of it, and he had never entirely stopped being angry about the reason for it. Matt came through the lobby at 9:23. He was dressed simply, dark trousers, a grey pullover, no tie, no performance of wealth. He looked like he had slept poorly. He saw Rohan stand, and he stopped walking for just a moment. And in that moment, something passed across his face that was not fear exactly, but was close to the honest cousin of it. He walked over anyway. "Rohan," he said. "Matt," Rohan said. They did not shake hands. Rohan gestured at the pair of chairs near the window, and they both sat down. Rohan looked at him for a long moment without speaking. Matt did not fill the silence. He sat with it the way a man sits when he knows he does not have the right to determine the pace of the conversation. "I'm going to tell you some things," Rohan said, "and I need you to hear all of them before you say anything." "All right," Matt said. Rohan told him. He told him about the 6 weeks after Matt left, the meals, the couch, the way Chiaka had cried with a silence that was worse than noise because it meant she was trying not to burden anyone with it. He told him about the morning he had driven over to her apartment unannounced and found her sitting on the kitchen floor with her back against the cabinet, not distressed in any visible way, just sitting there. And when he asked her what she was doing, she had said she was resting, and the way she said it made it clear she had not rested in a very long time. He told him about the diner, the double shifts, the way she had rebuilt herself with a thoroughness that looked from the outside like strength and was strength genuinely, but was also the specific kind of strength that comes from having nothing left to lose. He told him about Dunn, how she had started it on a second-hand folding table with equipment she bought in stages because she could not afford it all at once. How she had catered her first event for free just to get the photograph for the website. How she had driven across Greensboro in a car with a heating system that only worked on one side through 2 consecutive winters because she was putting every dollar back into the business. He told him all of it. Matt sat through every word without moving. He did not look away. He did not offer explanations or context or the kind of gentle self-defense that people reach for when they are being handed an accurate account of their own failure. He sat with his hands loosely joined in his lap, and he listened with the full attention of a man receiving something he had earned and knew it. When Rohan finished, there was a long quiet. "You're right about all of it," Matt said. Rohan had been prepared for deflection. He had been prepared for the particular eloquence of a wealthy man reframing his history. He had not been prepared for that. "Every single thing you just said is accurate," Matt continued. "I don't have a version of events that makes what I did defensible. I made a choice. It was the wrong choice. And the fact that I've spent 6 years being successful at everything else doesn't come anywhere close to addressing what it cost her." Rohan was quiet for a moment. "Then why are you here?" he said. "Because I love her," Matt said. "I have loved her since I was 28 years old eating bad waffles at a diner on Battleground Avenue, and I have not stopped for a single day in between. And I understand that is not sufficient reason for her to give me anything. But I'm not capable of pretending otherwise anymore." The lobby of the O. Henry moved quietly around them. A couple checked out at the front desk. A member of staff replaced the flowers in the arrangement near the entrance. Sunday morning at the hotel proceeded with its calm indifference to the weight of what was being said in the chairs by the window. Rohan looked at his hands for a moment. Then he said, "She doesn't look right." Matt went very still. "What do you mean?" he said. "I don't know exactly," Rohan said. "She's tired, more than she should be. She's thinner than she was 6 months ago, and she keeps saying it's the workload." He paused. "Chiaka has always worked hard. I know what her tired looks like. This is something different." He said it flatly, without drama, the way a person states a thing they have been observing carefully and have not yet found an explanation for. "Has she seen a doctor?" Matt said. "She says yes. She says everything is fine." He paused again. "She says a lot of things are fine." Matt did not respond to that immediately. He sat with it. There was something in the way Rohan had described it, the particular quality of unease in a careful man's voice, that landed in Matt's chest with a weight he could not quite name yet. "I need you to understand something," Rohan said finally. "If you are here for any reason other than the right one, if this is about guilt or nostalgia or some midlife reckoning you're having about the choices you made, then the kindest thing you can do is get back on I-85 and let her alone, because she has built something real here, and she does not have the energy right now to absorb something that isn't serious." "It's serious," Matt said. Rohan looked at him for a long time. Then he stood up. He did not offer his hand, and he did not smile, and he did not give Matt anything that could be mistaken for a blessing. But he also did not tell him to leave Greensboro. He straightened his jacket, and he looked at Matt one more time, and he said, "She has a phone. Use it. Don't corner her again." He walked through the lobby and out through the main entrance, and the door closed behind him with a soft, final sound. Matt sat alone in the chair by the window for a long time. Outside on Green Valley Road, the Sunday morning traffic passed in its easy weekend way. Inside the lobby of the O. Henry, the staff moved and the guests moved, and the hotel went about its business. Matt sat still and thought about what Rohan had said. Not the warning, not the history he had recounted with such precise and deserved accuracy. The other thing, she doesn't look right. He picked up his phone and looked at her photo for a long time. She was laughing in it, her head tilted back, her eyes almost closed, the afternoon light catching the left side of her face. He did not know what it meant yet, but something in him that had been still for years was paying attention now in a way it had not been before, and he did not know what to do with that yet, except carry it carefully and not look away. Chapter 5. Tawanda tells the truth. Tawanda, Bryson's message came through at 10:40 on Monday night. It was 3 words. Come see me. Matt stared at the screen for a moment. He had not given Tawanda his number. He had not spoken to her directly at any point since arriving in Greensboro. He typed back, "How did you get this number?" Her reply was immediate. "I have my ways. 7:30 tomorrow morning. La Fachel on South Elm. Come before I open." He was there at 7:22. La Fachel Hair and Nail Salon sat on South Elm Street in the heart of downtown Greensboro, a stretch of the city that had been pulling itself back to life for years. Old storefronts painted in deep colors, breweries and coffee shops, and small creative businesses occupying buildings that had been through several lives already. The salon's front window was dark when Matt arrived, but the door was unlocked, and Tawanda was inside setting up for the day, moving between stations with the brisk ownership of a woman entirely comfortable in her own space. She was 35, medium height, natural hair pinned up, wearing a salon apron over a burgundy turtleneck. She had the kind of face that communicated everything it intended to, and nothing it did not. She pointed at the styling chair nearest the window, without looking up. "Sit," she said. Matt sat. She brought 2 cups of coffee from the back room and set one in front of him, and kept one for herself, and then she leaned against the station across from him and looked at him with the direct, unhurried assessment of a woman who had been forming her opinion of him for 6 years and was finally in a position to deliver it in person. "I want to tell you some things," she said, "and I need to know before I start that you are genuinely here for the right reason and not just having some kind of wealthy man's crisis of conscience." "I'm here for her," Matt said. "That's not quite what I asked." He looked at her steadily. "I have loved Chiaka Dunn since I was 28 years old. I made the worst decision of my life when I let her go, and I have been aware of that every single day since. That is why I am here." Tawanda studied him for another moment. Then she nodded once, with the economy of a woman who has made a decision and does not require ceremony around it. "All right," she said, "then listen." She told him things he had not known. She told him that in the months after he left, Chiaka had not told a single person the full extent of what she was going through. Not her mother, not Rohan, not even Tawanda, who had known her since they were both 22 and trading sections at the diner on slow Tuesday afternoons. Chiaka had distributed her pain in careful, manageable portions, enough to seem human, not enough to alarm anyone. She told him about the night she had shown up at Chiaka's apartment with food and found her sitting at the kitchen table with a letter in front of her, a letter in an envelope with no return address. Chiaka had folded it quickly when Tawanda came in and said it was nothing, just a bill, and changed the subject with the smooth efficiency of a woman who had spent her whole working life managing other people's comfort. Tawanda had known it was not a bill. 3 years ago, Tawanda said, looking at him with an expression that was not accusatory but was not gentle either. "You sent her a letter." Matt went still. "You sent it, and then you did nothing," Tawanda continued. "No follow-up, no call, no appearance on her street, just a letter, and then silence." She paused. "Do you know she still has it?" The salon was very quiet. "She keeps it in her bedside drawer," Tawanda said. "I found out by accident about a year ago. She didn't know I'd seen it. I never told her I knew." She looked at him. "That woman put your letter in her bedside drawer and kept it there for 3 years, Matt. Not because she was waiting for you. She would die before she admitted she was waiting for anyone. She kept it because on the nights when she wondered whether any of it had been real, whether she had imagined the whole thing, built it up in her memory into something it never actually was, she could open that drawer and read it and know that it had been real." Matt looked at the floor for a moment. Then he looked back at Tawanda. "I sent it and I got scared," he said. "I told myself she had moved on. I told myself showing up after 3 years of silence would be an intrusion. I told myself a dozen things that were all versions of the same cowardice, dressed up as consideration. Yes, Tawanda said simply. That's exactly what it was. He received that without argument. Tawanda drank her coffee and looked at him steadily. She was deciding something. He could see it. She was measuring what she had already told him against what she was still holding, running the calculation of a woman who was deeply loyal to her friend and was trying to determine whether this man in front of her had earned the rest of it. She set her cup down. "There's something else," she said. "And I'm telling you this not to frighten you and not because it's my information to give. I'm telling you because somebody needs to be paying attention, and I'm not sure Chiaka is going to let that somebody be anyone who loves her." Matt waited. "She isn't well," Tawanda said. "I don't know exactly what's wrong. She won't tell me. She says it's nothing, it's tiredness, it's the season. But I have known that woman for 12 years, and I know what her tired looks like. And I know what she looks like when she is carrying something she has decided nobody else gets to carry with her." She leaned forward slightly. "She took painkillers with her coffee last Wednesday morning when she thought I wasn't watching. I was watching. She didn't know." Tawanda's voice was steady, but the steadiness was doing work. "She has lost weight since the summer. She moves more carefully than she used to, not dramatically. You'd miss it if you weren't looking for it. But I'm looking for it." She sat back. "I've tried to talk to her. She redirects me every time with a skill that would impress you. She is the most capable deflector I have ever met in my life, and I have known some world-class deflectors." She paused. "I don't know what's happening with her body, but something is happening, and she is handling it the way she handles everything, alone and in silence, and with complete determination that nobody around her should be inconvenienced by it." The street outside had begun to come alive. A delivery van rolled past. A woman unlocked the door of the bakery across the road. South Elm Street was starting its day in its ordinary way, entirely unaware of what was being said in the chairs by the window of the nail salon. Matt sat with everything Tawanda had told him. He thought about Rohan saying she doesn't look right. He thought about the gesture he had noticed in the church hall, her hand moving briefly to the side of her neck, a private and unguarded motion she had not seemed to know she was making. He thought about the photograph on his phone, her head tilted back in the afternoon sun, laughing with her whole self. Something settled in his chest that was not quite fear and not quite grief, but was made of components of both, and it did not move when he breathed. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "What do you need from me?" Tawanda looked at him. The question seemed to have landed differently than she expected. She was quiet for a beat. "I need you to be serious," she said. "Not the kind of serious that shows up for 2 weeks and then gets pulled back to Charlotte by a business crisis. The kind that stays. The kind that understands this woman has been let down by someone she loved once already and will not survive being let down in that particular way again." "I understand that," he said. "Do you?" "Yes," he said. "Completely." She looked at him for a long time. Outside, the morning had fully arrived on South Elm Street. The salon would open in 40 minutes. Tawanda had a full day ahead of her, and a conversation she had been carrying for longer than today to set down. She stood and picked up the coffee cups. "Use the letter," she said from the doorway of the back room. She kept it because the words in it were true. Go find some more true words and use them. Matt sat alone in the styling chair for a moment after she went to the back. He looked out through the salon window at South Elm Street in the morning light. The old storefronts and the new paint and the particular stubborn vitality of a street that had refused to disappear. He thought about Chiaka, building her business in this city, catering church fundraisers and community dinners, driving across Greensboro in a car with one working heater, buying equipment in stages, putting her name on everything she made with the quiet insistence of a woman who had decided that her work was going to mean something even when everything else had disappointed her. He thought about the letter in the bedside drawer. He got up from the chair and set the empty coffee cup on the counter and walked out onto South Elm Street into the cold November morning. That evening, alone in his room at the O. Henry Hotel, he did not look at spreadsheets or take calls or respond to the 17 messages Curtis had forwarded from people who needed things from him. He sat on the floor at the foot of the bed, and he put his face in his hands, and he wept. Not with elegance, not with the composed sorrow of a man who has processed his emotions thoughtfully and arrived at grief in an orderly fashion. He wept the way a man weeps when he has been holding something for 6 years, and a woman in a nail salon on South Elm Street has finally taken away the last reason to keep holding it. He wept for what he had left, for the letter he had sent and not followed, for the drawer it had lived in for 3 years, and then he got on his knees on the hotel room floor, and he prayed. It was not an eloquent prayer. It was not the kind of prayer a man composes in advance. It was a man talking to God in the plain language of someone who has run out of other options and is finally willing to admit it. He asked for her to be all right. He asked for the chance to be in the room when she needed someone and to be the kind of man who was worth having in the room. He stayed on his knees for a long time. When he stood up, his face was wet and the room was dark, and outside on Green Valley Road, the city was going about its evening without him. He picked up his phone. He called Chiaka's number for the first time. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. Her voice on the recording was businesslike and warm, the voice of a woman who ran something real and wanted you to know it. He listened to it. Then he said, "It's Matt. I know you're not going to call back tonight, and that's all right. I just needed you to know I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere. Take whatever time you need." He hung up. He sat on the edge of the bed in the dark room, and he waited, without expectation, for whatever came next. Chapter 6. Felicia Moves. Felicia Crane arrived in Greensboro on a Tuesday afternoon. She did not announce herself. She did not call Matt or send a message or give any indication that she was coming. She simply appeared, the way Felicia always appeared in situations she had decided required her personal attention, booked into a suite at the O. Henry Hotel on Green Valley Road, 2 floors above the room Matt was staying in, with a carry-on bag and a schedule she had already constructed before her flight touched down at Piedmont Triad International Airport. Her assistant had been thorough. Felicia's assistants were always thorough because Felicia did not retain assistants who were not. She knew Matt had been in Greensboro for over a week. She knew about the diner on Battleground Avenue and the market on Yanceyville Street and the church hall on West Florida Street. She knew the name Chiaka Dunn, and she had looked at the catering business website with the careful attention of a woman assessing a situation rather than a competitor, though the line between those two things, in Felicia's world, had always been somewhat indistinct. She knew enough. She unpacked in the suite, showered, changed into something that communicated wealth without announcing it, and made 3 phone calls. The first was to Raymond Collier, one of Matt's oldest business partners, a commercial property developer out of Raleigh, who had known Matt since the early contract days, and whose opinion Matt still valued in the way that men value the opinions of people who knew them before they had anything worth valuing. The second was to a man named Gordon Fitch, who sat on the board of one of Matt's primary logistics subsidiaries and who had been mildly uneasy about the lack of communication from Matt over the past 10 days. The third was to the manager of the Green Valley Grill downstairs, where she booked a table for 4 for Wednesday evening. She did not call Matt. The dinner on Wednesday was elegant and unremarkable on its surface. 2 business associates catching up over a meal, Felicia joining as a gracious mutual acquaintance, conversation moving through the easy topics of the industry before landing, with what appeared to be natural inevitability, on Matt's recent absence from Charlotte. Felicia said very little. She did not need to say very much. She asked questions that planted seeds, and then let Raymond Collier and Gordon Fitch water them with their own anxieties. She mentioned with the precise casualness of someone who has rehearsed precision that Matt seemed to be going through something personal, that she was concerned, that she hoped it would not affect the Meridian contract renewal, which was coming up in 6 weeks and required Matt's direct involvement. She said all of this with the warmth of a woman who genuinely cared about everyone at the table. She was extraordinarily good at this. Matt found out about the dinner the following morning. Curtis called at 7:58 and delivered the information in the flat, efficient manner of a man who understood that the most useful thing he could do in this moment was provide facts without editorializing. Matt listened to all of it. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "How bad is it?" "Collier called me last night," Curtis said. "He's not pulling out of anything, but he's nervous. The Meridian people have already heard something through Fitch. They want a call this week." "Set it up," Matt said. "Tomorrow morning. I'll handle it." "And Felicia?" Matt was quiet again. In the 6 years since he and Chiaka had ended, or rather, in the careful, dishonest language he had always used for it, since things between them had faded, Felicia Crane had occupied the space that money and ambition and the social architecture of the world he had built created for someone like her. She was intelligent and capable, and she moved through his professional world with an ease that was genuinely useful. She had never pretended to love him, and he had never pretended otherwise in return, which had seemed at the time like a sophisticated arrangement and revealed itself gradually as simply an expensive way to be lonely. He had ended it 4 months ago. She had not accepted that. He understood now that she had come to Greensboro not because she wanted him back in any genuine sense, but because she understood, with the precise instincts of a woman who had spent 15 years navigating the intersection of money and influence, that whatever was happening in Greensboro was a threat to the leverage she still believed she held. "I'll call her," Matt said. "Matt, I'll handle it," he said. "All of it. Set up the Meridian call and let me know the time." He ended the call and sat for a moment in the chair by the window. Then he picked up his phone and called Felicia. She answered on the second ring, which told him she had been expecting the call. She said his name with the warm familiarity of a woman greeting an old friend, which told him she had decided on her approach in advance. He did not match her tone. "I know about the dinner," he said. A brief pause. Felicia was rarely caught without a response, but she was occasionally caught between them. "I had dinner with some colleagues." "Raymond Collier and Gordon Fitch are not your colleagues," he said. "They are mine, and you told them I was emotionally compromised." I expressed concern. "Felicia." His voice was not raised. It did not need to be. It had the quality that very few voices develop, the absolute flatness of a person who has decided that this conversation has one purpose and no detours will be permitted. "We are done. That ended 4 months ago, and it ended clearly. What you did last night was not concern. It was an attempt to create professional consequences for a personal decision I made, and I need you to understand that it has not worked, and it will not work, and I need you to go back to Charlotte." Silence on the line. "There is a woman here," Felicia said. Her voice had shifted. The warmth was gone, and what was underneath it was something considerably more honest. "A caterer." "Yes," Matt said. "You left everything for a caterer." "I left nothing," he said. "I am conducting my business from Greensboro for a few weeks, and I am also attempting to repair the most significant mistake I have ever made. Those two things are not in conflict, and they are not your concern." Another silence, longer this time. "I'll have my team contact the Meridian people directly," Felicia said. "You will not," Matt said. "I will call them tomorrow morning and I will handle it. Do not contact any of my business associates again." He ended the call. He sat for a moment, Then he called Curtis back and told him to monitor Felicia's communications with anyone in the business network and to flag anything that required a response. Curtis said he would. Matt thanked him and ended that call too. He looked out the window at Green Valley Road. The Meridian contract was worth $38 million over 3 years. Losing it would not damage him seriously. He had built the company well enough that no single contract was existential. But it would be a distraction, and distractions right now felt like a cost he was not willing to absorb. He thought about Chiaka. He thought about the fact that she had no idea any of this was happening. That while she was in her apartment on Westover Terrace, preparing food and running her business and carrying whatever she was carrying alone in her body, in the quiet way she carried everything, a woman she had never met had flown into her city and sat at a dinner table and tried to dismantle something that had not even fully been built yet. He picked up his phone and he called Chiaka. She answered this time. "Matt," she said. Her voice was careful, neither warm nor cold. "I just wanted to hear your voice," he said. "I'm not calling to push anything. I'm not going to show up anywhere uninvited. I just wanted to call." A pause. "You called last night too," she said. "I did. I heard the voicemail. I figured." Another pause. He heard the ambient sound of her kitchen, the faint percussion of cookware, the low hum of something on the stove. She was working. She was always working. "Are you eating?" she said. The question surprised him. It was such a Chiaka question, the instinctive caretaking reflex of a woman who expressed concern through the most practical available channel. "I ate at the hotel," he said. "The Green Valley Grill?" "Yes." "Their sea base is good," she said. Then she was quiet for a moment, as though she had surprised herself by offering that. "I catered an event there once, about a year ago. Did they treat you well?" "They did," she said, and then, almost despite herself, "It was a good night." He did not push the conversation further. He understood instinctively that this small, ordinary exchange, the sea bass, the good night, the faint thawing of a carefully maintained temperature, was more significant than anything dramatic he could have orchestrated, and that the worst thing he could do was reach for it too eagerly and watch it close again. "Get some rest," he said. "You work too hard." She made a sound that was not quite a laugh. "Look who's talking." "I mean it," he said. A brief silence. "Good night, Matt," she said. "Good night, Chiaka." He sat with the phone in his hand after she hung up and looked at the wall of the hotel room. Outside on Green Valley Road, the Tuesday evening traffic moved in its ordinary way. He thought about the sea base. He thought about the good night. He thought about a woman standing at a stove in an apartment on Westover Terrace, working at 10 o'clock in the evening because she had a business to run and standards to maintain, and an entire life she had assembled without him, piece by careful piece, and how extraordinary it was that she had answered the phone at all. Meanwhile, across the city, in her kitchen on Westover Terrace, Chiaka set her phone face down on the counter and stood very still for a moment. Then she pressed the back of her hand against her side, briefly, the way she had been doing for months when the dull, insistent ache arrived to remind her of itself. She breathed through it. She turned back to the stove. She did not call anyone. She did not look anything up on her phone. She did what she always did with the things she was not ready to face. She placed them carefully to one side of her attention, and she kept moving forward, and she told herself there would be time to deal with it later. There was always time later. She told herself that too. Chapter 7. The letter. Matt called Chiaka on Thursday morning at 8:45. She was in her car outside a wholesale food supplier on Wendover Avenue, loading the last of a delivery into the back, when the phone rang. She looked at the screen. She set the last box down carefully and leaned against the car and answered. "I need to ask you something," Matt said, and I need you to know before I ask it that I am not trying to corner you or make you uncomfortable. I just need to know something that is true." She was quiet for a moment. "Ask." "Tawanda told me about the letter," he said. The street sounds continued around her. A truck reversing in the loading bay nearby, a radio playing somewhere inside the warehouse, the ordinary noises of a Thursday morning in Greensboro conducting itself without awareness of what was being said on the pavement outside. Chiaka did not respond immediately. "She had no right to tell you that," she said finally. "She told me because she is your friend, and she thought it mattered. What I keep in my own home is my business." "You're right," he said. "It is. I'm not calling to make you feel exposed. I'm calling because if what she told me is true, then I owe you something and I intend to pay it." Another silence. "What do you owe me?" Chiaka said. Her voice was careful, not hostile. Careful, the way a person is careful when they are standing near something that could hurt them and they have not yet decided whether to step closer or back away. "An explanation," Matt said, "for why I sent it and then disappeared again, for why I spent 3 years working up to 4 pages of honesty and then couldn't follow it with a single phone call." She did not answer. "Can I come over?" he said. "Not to stay, not to make anything into more than it needs to be, just to sit at your table and have a real conversation." A long pause. "Give me an hour," she said. She drove back to Westover Terrace, and she did not call Tawanda on the way. She did not call Rohan or her mother. She parked in the lot, and she sat in the car for a few minutes, the way she had been sitting in cars lately. Not thinking exactly, just allowing herself to arrive in the present moment before she was required to perform composure in front of someone who was looking for cracks in it. She went upstairs. She made coffee. She changed out of her work clothes into something comfortable, and she straightened the kitchen, the way she always straightened things when she was nervous. Not dramatically, just bringing everything into its proper alignment. The cups on their hooks, the dish towel folded, the counter clear. She sat down at the table. She was aware of the drawer in the bedroom. She did not go to it. Matt knocked at 9:53. She opened the door, and he was standing in the hallway with his coat over his arm and no performance about him. No flowers, no prepared expression, nothing staged. He looked like a man who had driven across the city to have a conversation he was afraid of and had decided that the only way to have it was plainly. She stood back and let him in. He sat at the kitchen table where she indicated. She poured 2 cups of coffee and sat across from him. The apartment was small and warm and smelled of the morning's cooking and the particular orderly quietness of a home that one person has arranged exactly to their own satisfaction. Matt looked around briefly, just once, taking it in. Then he looked at her. "The letter," he said. "The letter," she said. "I wrote it over about 6 weeks," he said. "I started it and stopped it more times than I can count. I wrote things and crossed them out and rewrote them. I have never in my life spent that much time on 4 pages of anything including business contracts worth 8 figures. He paused. "I sent it because I had reached the point where not saying the things in it was costing me more than saying them. I thought sending it was the brave thing. I told myself it was the brave thing. And then," she said, "and then I waited for a response that never came, and I told myself you had moved on," he said. "I told myself that your silence was an answer, and that showing up after 3 years would be an intrusion. I told myself I was respecting your decision." He stopped. None of that was true. All of it was fear. I had found a way to be honest on paper, and I could not find the same courage in person, and so I hid behind the interpretation that suited me. Chiaka wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. She looked at the table for a moment. Then she said, "I didn't respond because I didn't know how to." He was quiet. "I read it 4 times the day it arrived," she said. "I read it 4 times, and then I put it in the drawer because if I kept it on the table, I was going to do something with it that I wasn't ready for." She paused. "I was angry, not because of what was in it, because of the timing. 3 years, Matt. 3 years of nothing, and then 4 pages of everything I had needed to hear at 28, sitting in my mailbox, like it had simply been delayed in transit." "I know," he said. "I didn't know how to respond to it without either forgiving you completely or telling you exactly how much damage had been done," she said. "And I wasn't ready for either of those things, so I said nothing, and then you said nothing, and eventually the silence just became the situation." He nodded. She looked at him directly. "Why did you keep the photo?" "Because it was the truest picture I had of another person," he said. "Because every time I looked at it, I remembered what it felt like to be someone who hadn't yet made the mistake he was about to make. Because I couldn't delete it without deleting the last honest version of myself." The kitchen was very quiet. Outside on Westover Terrace, a car passed. Somewhere in the building above them, a door closed, the small sounds of an ordinary Thursday morning continuing regardless. "I kept the letter for the same reason," Chiaka said. "Not because I was waiting. I need you to understand that. I was not sitting in this apartment, waiting for Matt Weston to come back. I know that. I built something real here," she said. "I built it without you, and I built it well, and I am proud of it." "You should be," he said. "You should be extraordinarily proud of it." She looked at him. Something in his face was different from the 28-year-old she had known, the particular quality of a man who has been through enough to stop performing certainty. He looked like someone who knew exactly what he had and exactly what it had cost him, and was no longer interested in pretending otherwise. "The letter," she said quietly, "the things you said in it were true," he said. "All of it. Every word. You said you had never loved anyone the way you loved me. I haven't. You said the money meant nothing without someone to come home to. It doesn't. You said you had made the worst mistake of your life. I had," he said. "I have. I am sitting here in your kitchen 6 years later because that has not changed." Chiaka set her cup down. She stood up, and she went to the bedroom, and she came back with an envelope that had been opened carefully along the top, the kind of opening that preserves the envelope because the person opening it intended to keep the whole thing. She set it on the table between them. She did not take the letter out. She just set the envelope there. "I kept it," she said, "because on the nights when I wondered if I had invented the whole thing, built something in my memory that was bigger and more real than it ever actually was, I could open that drawer and know that I hadn't, that it had been real, that what I felt had been felt on both sides." She looked at him. "That was all I needed it for." Matt looked at the envelope on the table. He did not touch it. "I am not going to ask you to forgive me tonight," he said. "And I am not going to ask you to trust me because I understand that trust is not a thing you ask for. It's a thing you demonstrate over time, and I have not yet had the time to demonstrate it." He paused. "But I need you to know that I am not going anywhere. I am not going to send something honest and then disappear again. I am done disappearing." Chiaka looked at him for a long time. The kitchen held them both in its warm quiet. The coffee was going cold. The envelope sat on the table between them, like a small monument to the distance they had both been carrying. Then she did something he was not expecting. She reached across the table and she pushed the envelope toward him. "Take it," she said. He looked up. "Take it," she said again. "I don't need it anymore." He understood what she meant. Not forgiveness yet, not trust yet, but something, some small, precise act of release. She was setting down a thing she had been carrying, and she was choosing to set it down in his direction, and that was more than he had any right to expect, and he received it with everything he had. He picked up the envelope. He held it carefully. He did not speak for a moment, because there was nothing he could say that would be worth the weight of what she had just done, and he was wise enough to understand that. "Thank you," he said finally. She nodded once, stood up, collected the cups. "I have a delivery at 2 o'clock, she said. He stood and put on his coat. At the door, he turned. She was standing in the kitchen doorway with the cups in her hands, and she looked tired, the bone-deep tiredness he had been noticing, the kind that did not belong entirely to a long working day. He almost asked. He saw her register that he was about to ask, and he saw something in her face close slightly, not with hostility, but with the reflexive privacy of a woman who had been managing her own interior landscape alone for a very long time. He let it go. For now. "I'll call you tonight," he said. She looked at him for a moment. Then she said, "All right." He went out into the hallway, and the door closed behind him, and he stood there for a moment in the quiet of the corridor, with a 6-year-old letter in his hand, and the full weight of everything it represented, and he breathed slowly. Then he went downstairs, and out into the November air, and he sat in his car, and he looked at the envelope for a long time. He was not going to open it. He did not need to read it. He knew what was in it. He had written every word of it from the truest place he had ever accessed in himself, and the truest place in him had not changed. He put the envelope carefully in the inside pocket of his coat, close to his chest, and he started the engine. He had a Meridian conference call in 40 minutes, and a woman with a 2 o'clock delivery, and a city that was slowly becoming the most important place he had ever been. And he drove out of the Westover Terrace car park into the Greensboro afternoon with the specific feeling of a man who has been given something fragile and is determined this time not to drop it. Chapter 8. Douglas. Senator Douglas Weston arrived in Greensboro on a Friday morning. He did not tell Matt he was coming. He did not call ahead, did not send a message through his office, did not extend the courtesy of warning that he intended to insert himself into a situation he had been monitoring from Raleigh with the careful attention of a man who understood that his brother's personal life had a way of becoming his professional problem. He found out about Chiaka Dunn the same way powerful men in Douglas's circle found out about most things, through the peripheral vision of people who owed him information. A mutual acquaintance of Raymond Collier's had mentioned Greensboro. Felicia Crane had made a phone call to someone who had made a phone call to someone who eventually reached Douglas's chief of staff. The picture assembled itself across a week of fragments, and Douglas had sat with it long enough to decide that it required his personal attention. He drove himself. That was deliberate. No state vehicle, no aide in the passenger seat. This was not official business. He found Chiaka at the Greensboro Farmers Curb Market on Yanceyville Street at 9:40 on a Saturday morning. He had done his research. He knew she occasionally set up a small promotional table there for Dunn and Dunn, sample dishes, business cards, the kind of quiet community presence that built a local reputation one conversation at a time. She was there that morning at a folding table near the end of the row with 2 warming dishes and a small printed sign, speaking with an elderly woman who was eating something from a small tasting cup with the focused appreciation of a person who took food seriously. Douglas waited until the woman moved on. Then he approached. He was 61 years old, silver-haired, well-dressed in the particular way of men who have spent decades understanding that appearance is a form of argument. He had his brother's height and none of his brother's tendency toward honesty. "Ms. Dunn," he said. Chiaka looked up. She did not know who he was. That was clear from her expression. Polite, open, the professional warmth of a woman at her own table, ready to talk about her food. "I'm Douglas Weston," he said. "Matt's brother." The warmth did not disappear entirely, but it recalibrated. She straightened slightly. "Senator Weston," she said. "I'd prefer Douglas today if you don't mind," he said. "I'm not here in any official capacity. I'm here as Matt's older brother." "All right," she said. "What can I do for you?" He looked at the food on her table. He asked what it was. She told him, braised oxtail with butter beans and a side of fried cornbread, a sample menu item for a December event she was pitching. He nodded as though he were genuinely interested, which he was not. And then he said what he had come to say. He said it carefully. He was a careful man. He had spent 30 years in politics developing the ability to deliver unwelcome information in a register that sounded like concern. He told her that Matt was at a critical juncture in his business, that the Meridian contract renewal was pending and required his full attention, that there were board members who were already unsettled by his extended absence from Charlotte. He told her that the scrutiny that came with Matt's profile, the press interest, the business press in particular, had a way of affecting the people in his orbit in ways they did not always anticipate. He said the word narrative twice. He said the phrase, people in his circle once. He did not raise his voice. He did not threaten. He was far too practiced for anything that could be characterized as a threat. He simply explained reality as he had always defined it, in the measured tones of a man who believed that his definition of reality was the relevant one. Chiaka listened to all of it. She stood behind her table with her hands loosely at her sides, and she looked at him with an expression that gave nothing away and took everything in. She was a woman who had spent years working in rooms where other people set the terms and had learned, through long practice, to hear everything before she responded to any of it. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. The market moved around them. Vendors and customers and the ordinary Saturday morning commerce of Yanceyville Street proceeding without interest in what was happening at the end of the row. "Senator," she said. "Douglas," he said. "Douglas," she said. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." 6 years ago," she said, "when Matt was 28 and he had just gotten his first real contract and everything was starting to move for him." She paused. "Did you sit across from him and tell him that I wasn't the right fit for the life he was building?" Douglas said nothing. "Did you use the word narrative then too?" she said. "Or was it a different word that time?" The silence that followed was the most honest thing Douglas Weston had produced all morning. Chiaka nodded slowly. "Once." "I thought so," she said. She began covering one of her warming dishes with the deliberate movements of a woman who has decided a conversation is over but intends to close it on her own terms rather than the other person's. "I appreciate you coming in person," she said. "That took something. But I need you to understand that I am not a narrative problem. I am a person, and whatever Matt decides to do with his life is Matt's decision to make, not yours and not mine." She looked at him directly. "He made a decision 6 years ago that you were involved in. He is making a different one now. I haven't asked him to. I haven't encouraged him to. He is a grown man, and he gets to choose." Douglas looked at her for a moment. There was something in his expression that was not quite what he had arrived with. Something had shifted very slightly in the careful architecture of his face. "You're not what I expected," he said. "I know," she said. "I never am." He left. Chiaka watched him walk back through the market toward the car park, and she stood very still for a moment with her hand resting on the covered dish, and she breathed. She called Matt that afternoon. She told him everything, word for word, as precisely as she could reconstruct it. She had always had a good memory for conversations that mattered. Matt listened to all of it without interrupting. When she finished, there was a silence that had a different quality from his other silences. It was not the silence of a man processing information. It was the silence of a man arriving at a decision he had perhaps been approaching for some time and had now fully reached. "I'm sorry," he said. "I am genuinely sorry that he came to you. That was not acceptable." "He loves you," Chiaka said, "in his way. That doesn't make it acceptable." "No," she agreed, "it doesn't." "I'm going to call him," Matt said. "Matt, not to argue," he said. "I'm past arguing with Douglas. I've been arguing with Douglas in one form or another since I was 22 years old, and it has never once changed anything. He paused. I'm going to call him to tell him that this is finished. His involvement in my personal life. His assessment of who belongs in it and who doesn't. All of it. Finished. Chiaka was quiet for a moment. You don't have to do that for me, she said. I'm not doing it for you, he said. I'm doing it because it is 6 years overdue, and because I'm tired of being a man who lets the wrong people make the right decisions for him. She said nothing. I'll call you after, he said. He called Douglas at 6 that evening. Douglas answered with the careful neutrality of a man who had been expecting the call and had prepared for several versions of it. Matt did not raise his voice. He never raised his voice with Douglas. Raised voices with Douglas were counterproductive because Douglas was extraordinarily comfortable with conflict and used other people's emotional temperature as information. Matt spoke quietly and completely. He told Douglas that what he had done, arriving in Greensboro, finding Chiaka, delivering that particular message in that particular way, was a repetition of the most damaging thing he had ever done, and that the first time had cost Matt 6 years and the most important relationship of his life, and that he had allowed it because he had been 28 years old and not yet the man he intended to be. He was 38 now. He told Douglas that he loved him and that love was not in question. What was in question was Douglas's continued belief that his judgment about Matt's personal life carried any authority whatsoever. It did not. It had not for some time. Matt had simply not said so clearly enough. He was saying so now. She is not a narrative problem, Matt said. She is the woman I love. She has been the woman I love for 10 years, including the 6 I wasted. You will treat her with the respect that requires, or you will find that I am as capable of distance as you have always accused me of being incapable of. Douglas was quiet for a long time. You're serious, Douglas said finally. Not a challenge, an observation. Completely, Matt said. Another silence. She handled herself well this morning, Douglas said. From what I could tell. She handles everything well, Matt said. That is who she is. Yes, Douglas said, and then, in a tone that was as close to humble as Douglas Weston's register permitted, I can see that. It was not an apology. Douglas did not produce apologies easily or quickly. But it was something. It was a man of 61 who had spent his entire adult life being the person who defined the terms of every situation, acknowledging, with minimal ceremony, that he had perhaps not been entirely right about this one. Matt said goodnight and ended the call. He sat in his hotel room in the quiet of the Friday evening, and he looked at the city through the window, and he felt something that he recognized after a moment as a particular kind of relief. Not the relief of a problem solved, but the relief of a thing finally said. Of a silence that had been accumulating for a decade, finally broken in the right direction. He picked up his phone. He called Chiaka. She answered on the 3rd ring. He could hear her kitchen again, that familiar ambient warmth of a woman who cooked the way other people breathed, though the act of preparing food for others was simply the natural expression of being alive. It's done, he said. She was quiet for a moment. Are you all right? She said. And there it was again, that instinctive, unguarded reaching toward the other person that was so completely Chiaka, so entirely her, that it arrived in his chest every time, like something he had not prepared for, even though he knew by now that he should always prepare for it. I'm better than I've been in a long time, he said. She made a small sound. Not quite agreement, not quite dismissal. Something in between that meant she was listening and had not yet decided what to do with what she was hearing. I'm making jerk chicken, she said. There's enough. He was out the door in 4 minutes. Chapter 9. Almost. The jerk chicken was the beginning of it. Not of something new exactly, of something returning. Carefully, the way a plant returns after a hard winter, putting out one tentative shoot at a time, testing the air before committing to growth. Matt arrived at Chiaka's apartment on Westover Terrace that Friday evening, and she let him in without ceremony and set a plate in front of him at the kitchen table and sat across from him with her own plate, and they ate together for the first time in 6 years. They did not talk about Douglas. They did not talk about Felicia, or the Meridian contract, or the letter, or any of the weight they had been carrying toward each other for weeks. They talked about food, about the particular combination of Scotch bonnet and allspice that Chiaka had spent 2 years perfecting, about the supplier on Wendover Avenue who got his produce directly from 3 farms in Guilford County and whose sweet potatoes were, in Chiaka's considered opinion, the finest in the state of North Carolina. Matt ate everything on his plate and then sat back and looked at her with an expression that was uncomplicated and genuine. "That is the best thing I have eaten in 6 years," he said. She looked at him steadily. "You said that about everything I ever cooked." "Because it was always true." She almost smiled. She turned it into something more neutral before it fully arrived, but he saw it. He filed it carefully away. He washed the dishes without being asked. She stood in the kitchen doorway, watching him run water over the plates, with the domestic ease of a man who was not performing helpfulness, but simply doing what needed doing, and she had the specific, unsettling feeling of something familiar returning to a space that had reorganized itself around its absence. She was not sure whether that feeling was welcome or alarming. Possibly both. He left at 10:30. At the door, he did not try to extend the evening. He said goodnight simply, and she said goodnight, and he went down the stairs, and she closed the door and stood in the hallway of her own apartment for a moment in the particular quiet that follows the departure of a presence that has filled a room. She pressed her hand against her side. The ache was there. It had been there all evening, low and persistent, the way it always was now, not sharp enough to stop her, just constant enough to remind her it existed. She breathed through it and went to bed and told herself she would deal with it after the Tanger Center event, after December, after things slowed down. Things were going to slow down. She told herself that too. The Greensboro Symphony benefit dinner at the Stephen Tanger Center for the Performing Arts on North Elm Street was the largest event Chiaka had ever catered. 220 guests, a 4-course menu, a service team of 6, which she had spent 3 weeks assembling from people she trusted. The contract had come through a board member of the symphony who had eaten her food at the Weatherspoon Art Museum event in October and had called her directly the following week. She had not told many people about it when she landed it. She had sat with it alone in her kitchen for about 20 minutes, very still, the way she sat with things that mattered too much to react to immediately. Then she had called Tawanda and said, in a voice she was working to keep level, "I got the Tanger Center." Tawanda had screamed for approximately 30 seconds. Matt found out from Chiaka herself on one of their evening phone calls, and he had said nothing for a moment and then said, "Tell me what you need," in the tone of a man who understood that the question was not about money. "Nothing," she said. "I have everything I need." "Tell me what you want then," he said. She thought about it. "Come to the setup," she said. "Not the event, just the setup. I want—" She stopped. "What?" he said quietly. "I want someone there who understands what it means," she said. "Tawanda will be there, but she'll be crying the whole time and that won't help." He laughed, a real one. She heard it land in the phone and felt it somewhere she was not quite ready to name. "I'll be there," he said. Setup day was a Thursday in the first week of December. The Tanger Center on North Elm Street was a building that commanded attention without requesting it. 3,000 seats, a lobby that opened like a held breath, acoustics that the symphony's musicians described with the reverence of people who understood what it meant to be heard correctly. The loading dock entrance where Chiaka's van pulled in at 7 in the morning was considerably less glamorous, but she had never needed glamour in a loading dock. She needed efficiency. She had that. Matt arrived at 7:45. He was in dark jeans and a plain sweater, and he walked into the backstage prep area and found her directing the arrangement of warming equipment with the focused authority she brought to every setup, and he simply said, "Where do you need me?" And she put him to work immediately. He carried things, he moved tables when she pointed, he followed her instructions without requiring explanation and without offering opinions she had not requested. Her team absorbed him without comment. He was the man who showed up and worked, and in a catering setup, that was all anyone needed to know. By noon, the prep kitchen was running. By 2 in the afternoon, the event space was laid, and Chiaka walked the room the way she always walked a finished room. Slowly, alone, checking every table setting and every centerpiece and every detail that her team knew she would check, because she had told them from the beginning that her name was on this event, and her name meant something. Matt stood at the edge of the room and watched her walk it. She moved down the long row of tables with her clipboard at her side, and her eyes taking in everything, adjusting a fork here, straightening a napkin there, tilting a centerpiece vase by a degree that nobody else would have noticed was wrong. She moved carefully. She always moved carefully now. But in this room, on this day, she moved with a pride that was entirely unperformed and entirely earned, and it was the most beautiful thing he had seen in a long time. She reached the end of the last table and stopped. She stood there for a moment, looking at what she had built. 220 place settings in the main hall of the Stephen Tanger Center for the Performing Arts. Her food, her name on the program. Her business, grown from a folding table in an apartment kitchen in this room. Matt did not say anything. He waited. She turned and found him looking at her, and something crossed her face that she did not manage to contain in time. Something open and unguarded and genuine, the specific expression of a person who has worked very hard for a very long time, and is standing in the room where it has arrived and is allowing themselves just for a moment to feel it fully. He crossed the room slowly, and he stood beside her, and they both looked at the tables. "You did this," he said. "I did," she said, quietly, with complete conviction. They stood there together in the finished room, and the afternoon light came through the Tanger Center's high windows and lay across the white tablecloths in long, pale bars, and neither of them spoke for a while, and it was not an uncomfortable silence. It was the silence of two people who have been through enough to know that some moments do not require words. The event ran from 7 to 11 that evening. It was, by every measure that mattered, a complete success. The symphony's board chair found Chiaka at 10:30 as the dessert course was clearing, and shook her hand and said her food had been the subject of more conversation than the evening's program, which was, from a symphony board chair, an extraordinary thing to concede. Chiaka's team broke down the setup with the efficiency she had trained them to, and by midnight the Tanger Center kitchen was clean and the van was loaded, and her people had been paid and thanked individually. She sat in the driver's seat of the van in the loading dock, and she was more tired than she had words for. Matt appeared at the passenger window. She unlocked it. "Leave the van," he said. "I'll drive you home. Curtis can have someone bring it to Westover Terrace in the morning." She looked at him. "You've been on your feet since 7 this morning," he said. "Leave the van." She left the van. He drove her home in his car through the December streets of Greensboro, and she sat in the passenger seat, with her head resting back and her eyes half closed, and the city moved past the windows in its quiet, late-night way. The downtown lights thinning as they moved west, the familiar streets of the Westover area arriving in their dark, orderly sequence. She did not fall asleep, but she was close. He pulled into the Westover Terrace car park and stopped the engine. She did not move immediately. "Come up," she said. Not an invitation weighted with implication, just a woman who did not want to walk into an empty apartment after the biggest night of her professional life with no one to close the door with. He came up. She made tea. He stood in the kitchen and watched her move between the counter and the stove with the automatic ease of a woman in her own space, and he picked up a dish towel when she set 2 cups down, and she looked at him sideways. "You are going to ruin that sweater," she said. "I have other sweaters," he said. She made a sound that was almost a laugh, the most unguarded sound she had made in his presence since he had come back. She turned back to the mugs, and he dried the 2 spoons she had used and set them on the counter, and the kitchen was warm and quiet, and it felt, for the first time in 6 years, like something that was supposed to be. She reached for the mugs. Her hand stopped. She set both hands on the counter edge, and her head dropped slightly, and she went completely still. Not the stillness of someone resting, the stillness of someone absorbing something. "Chiaka," he said. "I'm fine," she said immediately. Automatic. The word she had been using for months. Chiaka. He was beside her, not touching, just there, in the way that mattered. "Look at me." She did not look at him immediately. She breathed, once, twice. Then she straightened and turned, and she looked at him, and he saw it, all of it. Everything she had been managing alone for months, visible for just a moment in her face before she could reconstruct the composure. "I'm going to call Tawanda," he said quietly. "Don't—" "I'm calling Tawanda," he said, with the same quiet flatness he had used with Felicia and with Douglas, the voice of a man who had reached the end of the distance between what he was willing to accept and what he was not. "And then we are going to figure out what is happening, together. You are not doing this alone anymore." Her eyes were bright. She pressed her lips together. "It's probably nothing," she said. And for the first time, hearing her say it, he understood that she had been saying it for so long, she had almost convinced herself, and almost was the most frightening word he had ever heard. He took her hand. She did not pull back. He called Tawanda. Tawanda arrived in 11 minutes. She took one look at Chiaka and called 911 without discussion, with the decisive love of a woman who had been waiting for permission to do this for months, and had finally been released from the obligation of pretending everything was fine. The ambulance arrived on Westover Terrace at 12:47 in the morning. Matt rode behind it in his car through the empty December streets of Greensboro, following the lights north on Elm Street toward Moses Cone Hospital, and he drove with both hands on the wheel and his jaw set and his eyes on the red lights ahead of him, and he did not look away from them for a single second. He was not losing her. He had found her. He was not losing her. Chapter 10. The Hospital Room. Moses Cone Hospital on North Elm Street never fully slept. It ran through the night in its own particular register, quieter than the day, slower, but never still. Corridors that hummed with urgent foot traffic in the afternoon hours settled into a more deliberate pace after midnight. The overhead lights dimmed in the patient wings, the nursing stations holding their careful vigil over the people in the rooms who were fighting things that did not observe schedules or respect the hour. Matt pulled into the hospital car park at 1:14 in the morning. He had followed the ambulance the entire way from Westover Terrace. He had not let it out of his sight. When it turned off North Elm Street into the emergency bay, he had parked in the nearest available space without caring what the sign above it said, and he had walked through the emergency entrance doors with the focused calm of a man who has narrowed the entire world down to one room and one person. Tawanda was already inside. She had ridden in the ambulance with Chiaka, holding her hand in the narrow space between the stretcher and the ambulance wall, talking to her steadily about nothing in particular. The Tanger Center dinner, the Symphony Board Chair's reaction, the sea base at the Green Valley Grill, because Tawanda understood that keeping Chiaka tethered to ordinary things was more useful than anything dramatic in that moment. She found Matt in the waiting area, and she looked at his face and said, "She's conscious. They're running tests." He sat down. He did not pace. He did not make calls. He sat in the plastic chair with his elbows on his knees and his hands joined, and he waited with the absolute stillness of a man who has decided that the only thing required of him right now is to be present, and he intends to be present with everything he has. Rohan arrived at 1:58. He had driven from his house on the east side of the city, and he came through the emergency doors with the particular controlled urgency of a man who has trained himself not to run in situations that require clear thinking. He found Tawanda first, and she told him what she knew, which was not much yet. Then he found Matt, and he sat down beside him, and neither of them spoke for a while. That was all right. They did not need to speak. They were two people who loved the same woman and were sitting in the same waiting room, and that was sufficient common ground for the moment. Beverly Dunn arrived at 2:23. She had driven herself from her house, and she came through the doors with 62 years of lived experience and 30 years of nursing at this very hospital, informing every step. She knew this building. She knew its corridors and its systems and the particular language its staff used when they were telling you something difficult. She had walked these floors as a professional for 3 decades. Walking them now as a mother was an entirely different thing, and she moved through it with the specific dignity of a woman who had learned to carry hard things without setting them down in public. She saw Matt sitting beside Rohan. She sat on his other side. He looked at her. She looked at him. She reached over and covered his clasped hands with one of hers for a moment. A brief, firm gesture that said more than she intended to say out loud. And then she sat back and folded her own hands in her lap and looked at the doors that led to the treatment area and waited. The doctor came out at 3:41. Her name was Dr. Renee Okafor. She was perhaps 45, composed and precise, with the manner of a physician who had delivered difficult information many times and had learned to do it with directness and humanity in equal measure. She asked who was family. Beverly said, "I'm her mother." Rohan said, "Her brother." The doctor looked at Matt. Matt said, "I'm the person who is going to make sure she has everything she needs, whatever that requires." Dr. Okafor looked at him for a moment. Then she nodded and included him without further question, which was either a professional accommodation or an accurate reading of the situation, possibly both. She told them, cervical cancer, stage 3. It had been developing for some time. The symptoms Chiaka had been experiencing for months, the fatigue, the persistent pain she had been managing privately, the weight loss, all of it consistent with a progression that had been quietly advancing, while she explained it away with the formidable creative energy she applied to every problem she decided was manageable alone. It was treatable. That was the word Dr. Okafor used first and used clearly. Treatable. Not easy, not without significant intervention and a difficult road, but treatable, with the right course of action, with the right team, with the resources to access the best available options. She had been admitted to the ICU as a precaution given the severity of her exhaustion and a secondary infection that had been compounding her condition. She was on a ventilator to support her breathing while they stabilized her. She was not in immediate danger of her life if they acted promptly and thoroughly. Beverly made a sound that was not a word. Rohan put his head in his hands. Tawanda stood with her arms wrapped around herself and looked at the ceiling for a moment with the expression of a woman who had known something was wrong for months and had not been wrong and did not feel any satisfaction in that whatsoever. Matt stood very still. He looked at Dr. Okafor and he said, "What is the best treatment available?" The doctor outlined the protocol: surgery, followed by a combination of chemotherapy and radiation, a course of treatment that would run several months and required consistent specialist involvement. Matt said, "What is the best treatment available anywhere in the country?" Dr. Okafor paused. "There is a specialist at MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston," she said carefully. "Dr. Patricia Mensah. She runs a clinical protocol for stage 3 cervical cancer that has shown significantly better outcomes than the standard course. It is more aggressive. It requires the patient to be in Houston for extended periods. Is she available? Matt said. She has a waiting list. I understand that, Matt said. I am asking whether it is possible to reach her. Tonight, if necessary. Tomorrow morning at the latest. Dr. Okafor looked at him with the measured assessment of a physician recalibrating her understanding of the conversation she was in. I can make a call in the morning, she said. Dr. Mensah and I trained together. I can reach her directly. Please do that, Matt said. Cost is not a factor. Travel is not a factor. Whatever Chiaka needs, wherever she needs to be, whatever the expense, none of that is a consideration. The only consideration is the best possible outcome for her. He said it quietly, without performance, without the self-consciousness of a man making a grand gesture. He said it the way he said everything that was simply true. The corridor was very quiet. Beverly was looking at him. Rohan had lifted his head from his hands and was looking at him. Tawanda was looking at him. Nobody said anything for a moment. Then Matt said to Dr. Okafor, "Can I see her?" The doctor led him through the doors. The ICU was a different world from the waiting room, quieter still and purposeful in its quiet. The measured sounds of monitors, the soft movements of the night nursing staff, the particular quality of a space devoted entirely to the serious business of keeping people alive. She was in the third room on the left. Matt stopped in the doorway. Chiaka lay in the hospital bed with the ventilator breathing for her in its steady mechanical rhythm. She was smaller than she looked when she was standing. That was the thing he was not prepared for. How the absence of her own motion, her own directed energy, her own complete self-possession made her look diminished in a way she never was. She was not diminished. He knew that. But she looked fragile in a way she had never allowed anyone to see her look, and it arrived in his chest like a physical thing. He stood in the doorway for a long moment. Then he walked to the chair beside her bed and he sat down. He took her hand. Her hand was warm. That was something. That was a great deal, actually. He held it in both of his, and he looked at her face. The face he had been carrying in a photograph for 6 years, currently still and unguarded in a way she would not have permitted if she had been conscious. And he felt something that had no adequate name in any language he knew. He bowed his head over her hand. He prayed. He did not pray silently. He was past caring about the nursing staff moving in the corridor, or the monitors keeping their steady count, or the particular vulnerability of a man on his knees in a hospital room. He prayed out loud, in the plain, honest language of someone who had exhausted every other option and was talking directly to God, with no intermediary and no prepared text. He asked for her life. He said he understood that he had no particular claim on grace, that he had made the choices he had made and had not been a man who deserved special consideration. He said he was not asking on his own behalf. He was asking on behalf of a woman who had spent her entire life building something real and caring for other people and carrying everything alone, and who deserved, more than anyone he had ever known, the chance to be cared for in return. He said he would spend every day of whatever came after this making sure she never carried anything alone again if God would give him the chance. He said, "Please." He was on his knees beside the chair, and his face was wet, and he did not wipe it, and he did not stop. When he lifted his head, the room was the same as it had been. The monitors continued, the ventilator continued. Chiaka lay still, and the December night pressed against the hospital window, and the city existed beyond it, in its sleeping, indifferent way. Beverly was standing in the doorway. She had come in quietly at some point during the prayer, and she had stood there and listened, and she was standing there still with her hands folded in front of her and her face composed in the way of a woman who has made a decision about something and is at peace with it. She came in and sat in the other chair on the far side of the bed. They sat together, on opposite sides of her daughter, the mother and the man who loved her, and the night moved around them at its own pace. At some point, Rohan appeared in the doorway and looked in, and then went back to the waiting room without saying anything, because there was nothing to say that would add to what was already present in that room. At some point, Tawanda sat against the wall in the corridor outside and looked at the ceiling and let herself cry properly for the first time since the ambulance, which she felt she had earned. At 2 in the morning, Beverly went to get coffee from the machine at the end of the corridor. She brought back 2 cups and set one on the table beside Matt without a word. He looked up at her. She sat back down. She had been a nurse for 30 years. She had sat in rooms like this one many times, on the other side, the professional side, the side that maintained composure because someone had to. She had always believed in the truth that the people who stayed were the people who mattered, not the ones who sent flowers, not the ones who called and asked for updates, the ones who sat in the plastic chair and did not leave. Matt Weston had not moved from that chair. She looked at him across her daughter's bed, and she thought about the man who had sat at her kitchen table 6 years ago and chosen differently. And she thought about the man who was sitting in this hospital room at 2 in the morning with his daughter's hand in both of his, and she understood that these were 2 different men, even though they occupied the same body, and that the second man was the one she was looking at now. She did not forgive the first man entirely. That was Chiaka's work, not hers. But she was done being angry at him. She drank her coffee, he drank his. The night continued. At 3:47 in the morning, in the 3rd room on the left in the ICU of Moses Cone Hospital on North Elm Street in Greensboro, North Carolina, Chiaka Dunn's hand moved. Not dramatically, not with the sudden clarity of a television moment. A small tightening, a closing of her fingers around Matt's in the almost imperceptible way of someone who is deep inside something difficult and has registered from very far down that there is a hand to hold. Matt felt it. He went completely still. He looked at her face. She was not awake. Her eyes did not open. The ventilator continued its steady rhythm. Nothing visible had changed, but her hand had tightened around his. He tightened his hand around hers in return, very gently. Just enough to say I'm here, just enough to say I'm not going anywhere, just enough to say everything the letter had said, and everything the photograph had said, and everything 6 years of silence had failed to say, compressed into the pressure of 2 hands in a hospital room at 4 in the morning. Beverly had seen it. She set down her coffee cup very carefully. She looked at her daughter's face for a long moment. Then she looked at the window where the December darkness was beginning, almost imperceptibly, to give way to the first grey suggestion of morning on North Elm Street. She did not speak. There are moments that do not require speech, moments that have said everything they need to say through the most basic available language. Presence, touch, the simple, irrefutable fact of a hand that does not let go. This was one of those moments. Matt sat in the chair beside Chiaka's bed as the night gave way to morning, and the hospital breathed around them, and the monitors kept their faithful count, and outside on North Elm Street, the city of Greensboro began, slowly and without ceremony, to wake up. He was still there when the light came. He was still there.